Hello. Can I present? I can present. Good. Hello. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. My name is Frank Cifaldi. This is SNK 40th anniversary. Hope you're in the right place. I'm going to go a little bit off script for a minute here, because as I was working on this, I realized that sort of reflecting on the stuff we did before SNK kind of helps you contextualize what it is that we did on this product, and it's kind of important to me that we all understand this. So again, my name is Frank. I work at these two places. Digital Eclipse is a video game developer in Emeryville, California. The Video Game History Foundation is a video game nonprofit association, also in Emeryville, California. The first one pays me, the second is volunteer work. You guys, anyone here familiar with the foundation? Okay, that makes me very happy, thank you. Preservation's kind of my thing, video game preservation, and even at these two jobs, I kind of do it in two different ways. So the Video Game History Foundation, what we're trying to do in the sort of public education nonprofit sector is to make sure that historians have access to materials to tell the story of video game history. So things like books and magazines, or games themselves sometimes, all the way down to source code to sort of see how the games were actually made. Building a source code repository is kind of a big goal of ours. And then unreleased games as well, we try to expose. You might have seen headlines about SimCity for the NES recently. Yeah, that was us. I haven't been sued yet. And then at Digital Eclipse, I do what I call commercial preservation. Because I think that preserving a video game is more than just making sure the material is safe. I think part of it is also making sure that they're kept alive sort of in the public consciousness, that people know what they are. And for right now, the most accessible way of playing these old games is through commercial publication. And so at Digital Eclipse, we try to preserve video game history by republishing old games in a way that contextualizes them and also presents them correctly is sort of our thing. Okay, so the thing with Digital Eclipse is that we think that games are maybe as important as movies, probably more important than movies for a lot of us in this room. And when you get an old movie, you get a lot of cool old stuff. I mean, like, this is just the first two ones that I grabbed on Amazon this afternoon when I was putting my slides together. But like, the first one's Back to the Future, and you get, deleted scenes. You get like these little video featurettes that they made just for the Blu-ray. You get a Q&A with Michael J. Fox. I mean, you get like the original makeup tests. You get to see like Christopher Lloyd being Doc Brown before they had his wig on and stuff. So sort of like, trying out for the role and things like that. Power of Love music video, that's great. The other one is Casablanca. So like even the really old movies that, you don't have like, the actors and the directors around to talk to, we sort of, in Hollywood, they sort of fill that gap with historians. Like Roger Ebert's no longer with us now, but at the time he was, and he did a tremendous commentary track on Casablanca. There are vintage interviews in there. There's, other featurettes that they made. And this tends to happen with most notable movies when they get released, on home media, or when they get re-released or remastered. They tend to do even more stuff. Outtakes would be sort of my favorite personally, because I like to sort of see the things that were cut from a creative work, because it kind of helps me understand why things were kept in and what was important to the original vision. When games come out, not so much. Usually maybe you can map the buttons, maybe not on Virtual Console. You get a save state, that's cool. Maybe it's portable now, that's new. And I don't know, you can feel good about yourself because you didn't pirate the thing. It's sort of a feature that you get. I don't know, I think this is ridiculous. I think that at this point in history, I think Super Mario Brothers is way more culturally relevant to who we are as a people than Casablanca, which is a great film. I'm not shit talking Casablanca. I'd say, yeah, it's kind of obscene, I think, that games don't tend to get this kind of treatment. One way we tend to see old games is in these big value packs. And these are great for the consumer. It's a great sort of value proposition where you get these 50 old games in a package. But even then, and I would say especially because there's so many games in these packages, they don't really take the time to sort of reflect on them and give you more insight into them and help you sort of celebrate them. They just kind of give you, a bunch of games and go, here you go, have fun. And, that's not the kind of product that we like making. Like, to me, these remind me of, like, at Big Lots when you could get this giant value pack of cowboy movies. Like, that's what these collections feel like to me, and that doesn't do anything for me. By the way, in this picture, is it 100 movies or is it 50 movies? You see on the spine? No, it's 24 discs, not 50 discs. We'll have to solve this mystery some other time. So like the supplemental materials on these packages, they tend to be minimal or usually missing. There's no context for what these are or why we care. The other way we typically see, and I say typically, we're not the only ones doing cool stuff. Like M2 is amazing. You should check their work. You should get Phantasy Star on Switch if you didn't get that already. The other way we typically see old games getting republished is these sort of standalone $8 releases, which again is just like the game and no bonus features or anything like that. And even then, it's like, they're not carefully curated old games typically. They're like the games that are easy to license, right? So like, it's kind of easy to get Data East stuff, so we get whatever Night Slashers is. I have no idea. Like, I'm a video game historian. That's what I put on my business card. I don't know what that game is, but you could buy it sight unseen for $8 on the Switch shop. And I don't know. Like, I don't know what the market's like for that. I suspect it's not great. And I mean, really, at the end of the day, what you're getting in here is an emulator and a ROM, right? And for me, was that a question?
Yeah, I want to bring up like the Nintendo arcade archive games like Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr.
Okay.
Those did really well.
Those did really well. Yeah. So the point brought up was that the Nintendo arcade archives did really well, and of course they did because people buy Nintendo games. But I'm gonna poo-poo on it for a second because in the Donkey Kong release, they don't. When Mario walks, it's supposed to be like random sounds, like. But in the hamster release, it's just like. It's wrong. It's objectively wrong. They destroyed Donkey Kong. It has nothing to do with the speaker. It has to do with bad emulation. Not bad, wrong emulation. Because it's actually a really hard thing to do. We've messed with it ourselves. So, again, these tend to, they're just kind of ROMs inside of an emulator package and sold to you, which, is fine if that's what you want. But I think that, I think educated, I think there's a large amount of people who already know their way around emulation, around ROMs, and that they're maybe not a very big audience for this. I don't think anyone's an audience for Frontline. That game's kind of terrible. But they're it's just emulators. Don't get me wrong, emulators are awesome. I love emulators. I'm not a cop. Go emulate the hell out of games. It's great. In fact, I would argue that people who emulate games are probably their biggest fans. I mean, these are people who go out of their way to circumvent the law. They go out of their way to figure out, where to actually get these games now that Nintendo has destroyed a valuable cultural archive. They figure out how to set these things up and download BIOS files and stuff. And these people, to me, these aren't. I mean, yes, they're pirates, but they're also they're my people. They're exactly who I want to sell to. I want to give a value proposition to people like me who, already know how to get these games for free in a frankly superior experience. So that's sort of who Digital Eclipse targets with our releases. So we reformed Digital Eclipse about 3.5, maybe 4 years ago. Time flies, I don't remember. Digital Eclipse actually was a company that started way back in '92. And I won't bore you with the complete history, but essentially, when we were doing Mega Man Legacy Collection, we were starting this notion of like, hey, there should be, a Criterion collection for video games. We bought back the Digital Eclipse brand because our company, like the founders of our company also founded Digital Eclipse, so we thought it'd be a cool branding to sort of bring back for that. So we do, deluxe collector's editions of games with bonus features. Is sort of, the brief version of it. What we try to do is not just be like, hey, here's a game, figure it out, bye. We try to sort of contextualize them to help you understand what they are, to help you understand why they were important in their time, maybe why they're important now, and try to ease you into playing them even because not everyone likes to play old games or knows how to. So our first one was Mega Man Legacy Collection. It was the original 6 Mega Man games for the NES. And our approach to this one, we approach each project a little bit differently because I don't think there's like a template for this sort of thing. For Mega Man Legacy Collection, our feeling was that these games already have a ton of fans. These fans already know how to play the games, and you could jump into these games pretty easily. It's a D-pad and 2 buttons. It's not hard to figure out. And that, I felt that the majority of people buying this would probably be people who already knew the game. So what we sort of focused on was, well, let's just like cram as much added value in here as we can and make it a party, make it a celebration, make it like the hardcover graphic novel on your shelf of Watchmen or whatever, but for Mega Man. So each game has a little like virtual museum with a bunch of art in it. This is one of my favorites. This is in the Mega Man 2 section. We were fortunate enough to get a bunch of unused boss concepts. So we have a lot of sort of behind the scenes material like this in this collection. Things like you would expect to get on a DVD to sort of understand the creative process. And this is kind of the equivalent of like those cut scenes from a movie maybe. And it's not just that sort of behind the scenes stuff. We also have all the like production art you would see in the manuals and like marketing guides and things like that. What we also added was this feature called the database. When Capcom originally redid the Mega Man games for the PS1, they had this feature, the database, and basically every time you killed a type of enemy, it got added into the database, and you can go in there and like read their little bio and see their weaknesses. And it was only ever in Japanese, so we kind of like made an HD version of it and got them translated for the first time. So you get new lore for the fans, such as knowing that the Mecha Dragon is mostly a hydrogen balloon. There you go. Now you know that. And then the other thing we did was we wanted to give players sort of a new way of playing these games. Because again, to our minds, the main buyer of this product is people who know the Mega Man games. I want to give them something a little bit new, but money and time are finite resources, so we couldn't go too far. So what we did was what we called the challenge mode. And what this does is, have any of you guys played this? Just show of hands real quick. Oh, most of you, that's great. Basically what we did was we took little snippets of different stages from the 6 Mega Man games and like strung them together in like little Mega Man like mixtapes. So you'd be running along, and the objective is to get to a portal as fast as you can. So you might be in like Cutman stage from 1, and you hit a portal, and it'll throw you to Tomahawk Man from 6, I think. But the point being, like, all these games play similarly, they look the same. So it's kind of, I think in my head it was like he was traveling through time or something. I don't know. I wanted to give players a new way to play. I wanted to give, like speedrunners a new game, basically, because I felt that that was sort of a big part of classic game culture at the time, and still now, I guess, was speedrunners, and I kind of wanted them to embrace this product as well. Our follow-up to that was Disney Afternoon Collection. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands because I know nobody bought this. Thank you so much. I really like this one. So sort of a similar product on the face of it, which is 6 NES games from Capcom. But our approach here was a little bit different. We didn't assume that, I mean, DuckTales was pretty popular, as was Rescue Rangers, but we didn't assume that the built-in audience that we're selling to here is people who are like experts at these games. What we assumed was that what we would attract would be like Disney fans, like nostalgic Disney fans. So we went for, I mean, like pure 90s, you know, Saved by the Bell vomit everywhere, to sort of get you in that mindset of like, yay, the 90s, you like that for some reason. And actually, the title itself, the Disney Afternoon Collection, really plays to that. We were really fortunate that Disney let us use that name. Disney Afternoon was actually the name of like the programming block that all these shows aired on. So I thought it was cool that they just let us do it. And actually, all right, I'm going to give you a little bit behind the scenes. Maybe I shouldn't. So early in this product's development, we didn't have the Rescue Rangers games in there. We weren't asked for them, and they didn't want them. So we kept pushing the name Disney Afternoon, and then they adopted it, because my secret plan in the back of my head was Disney's going to see Disney Afternoon and be like, where's Rescue Rangers? And it worked. So I got my way, but also had to do more work because we increased the game count from 5 to 6, but that's okay. And then, just another sort of fun behind-the-scenes thing, the database thing from Mega Man. Disney really liked that feature in Legacy Collection. They're like, you got to do that for our thing. And it's like, we had to explain that like the bear that you jump on doesn't have like a name or a backstory. You know, he's just a bear. Like, I don't really want to make this stuff up. So the challenge mode in Mega Man, I liked it a lot, but I felt it was kind of bulky. There were like 60 challenges, and they weren't really all that well thought out. So for Disney Afternoon, we really refined it down. It's like, okay, each game has a time attack and a boss rush, and that's it, which I thought was a pretty big improvement. But it also helps you sort of see a lot of the content in this game without being good at it. You could quickly see all the bosses. Oh, and something I should say about challenges and the boss rush, by the way, that it was really cool, I thought, was that it's time-based, and you save your run and upload it to the leaderboard, and people can like watch you play. So you can go watch like the world record for the Rescue Rangers 2 boss rush. It's not me, but it's pretty great. So for the behind-the-scenes stuff here, we didn't focus so much on the making of the games, frankly, because we didn't have anything to support that. But what we focused on was how the cartoons sort of transitioned into games. Capcom actually kept all of the crap that Disney faxed them back then, which was amazing. So like we had, you know, these like model sheets from the cartoon that Disney was sending, not being like, hey, put these guys in the game. It was just like they sent a giant stack of all the model sheets and stuff from the cartoon. They're like, use this for reference. And when Capcom's pixel artists used it for reference, they literally traced it, which is pretty good. These robot bulldogs are from an episode called Catteries Not Included. That's just ingrained in my brain now, so there it is. And we also were able to include packaging and stuff, which we couldn't do on Mega Man, including this completely non-copyright infringing portable version of DuckTales for generic portable platform that's got a silver stripe on the left. Yeah, so I really like that one. The third one we did, which, good God, was released last year. Last year was so long. This feels like forever ago. The Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection. This was a very ambitious and lengthy project for us. The approach when we started it was sort of a casual product. Like, it was meant to be for people like me who I played Street Fighter 2 in the 90s and then walked away. Like, what happened after that? So that was sort of the pitch and the approach at the start. But as production continued, the ask from Capcom became, no, let's make this more of a hardcore Street Fighter product. So we had to do things like add training mode to the old games without source code. That shouldn't happen. How did we do that? I don't even know. This is really stretching the boundaries of emulation. This shouldn't be possible, but there it is. But my role on this was more on the museum side. And the approach we wanted to take here for this sort of package for superfans is, what does 30 years of Street Fighter like actually look like? What does that mean? So the way we tried to visualize that was with this interactive timeline where you go through each year and I sort of point out things that happened in the world of Street Fighter that year, and you click on each one and there's a big art gallery. There's an obscene amount of art in here. I lost count, but it's over 1,000 pieces of art, most of them at like 4K textures, which is why if you downloaded it, I'm sorry, it's so huge, it's all that art. But also, you're welcome. And we went all the way up to Street Fighter. Actually, the last entry in the timeline is Street Fighter 30th anniversary, which I thought was pretty cute. But then I really took the time here to like focus on Street Fighter 2, because to me that's the historically important one, and we did a really big making of featurette where I did things like I found in an old book that Capcom published, like the original Street Fighter 2 that got canceled before they worked on the real one, and like this is the original 8 World Warriors. We were able to sort of show them in a Capcom product for the first time, and this is a really weird one for me to work on because we did this like history of Street Fighter 2, and I'm a good journalist. I did my research and I put out something that I feel I could back up with documentation and everything, but no feedback, like no changes, nothing. So if something's wrong, it's entirely my fault, but also they should have fact checked. And we had the sprite viewer that I thought was really cool because again, we wanted to show like the evolution of the series. And what we did here was, you could look at the major frames of animations for most of the special moves for every character, and then you could tab over game to game and like see how those sprites evolved, which works for Street Fighter, maybe not so much for Darkstalkers, because what's her name never changes. Pro tip, if you're going to do a collection like this, look at the museum art before you submit your ESRB rating, so that you know to say that there's cigarettes in here. Otherwise, you might have to Photoshop a cigarette out of Guile's mouth and make him just look like he's reflecting on his Zippo. I don't know. All right. This is kind of our philosophy, what we've learned over the years. I don't think people really want to play old games. I think they want to experience them, but I don't think they want to play them. And what I mean by that is that we don't typically, and I'm sure many of us in this room are exceptions, we don't typically play games like we used to. We don't get like one game that is our one game for like the next 4 months. You know what I mean? Like we don't take the time to like master these things and really learn how to play them over and over again. Like that's just not how we do things anymore. And that's why it really frustrates me, among other reasons, when these games are just put out and it's like, there it is, good luck. Because I like Namco Museum's a really good example. There's a Namco Museum on the Switch that I bought, and like I thought I wanted to play these games, and kind of turned out I didn't. But then I didn't have anything else to do. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't look at anything. I couldn't play weird like boss rushy modes or anything like that. All I could do was just play the arcade games. I don't think people should have to master these old games to enjoy them. I think that's silly. I hate unlockables. Like we refuse as a company to lock anything behind like skill for these old games. I think that's stupid. Really the sort of philosophy that we have is they're your toys. You should be able to play with them however you want. Kind of going back to, I don't think people really want to play this stuff. My goal with every one of these projects is that if you buy this and you just interact with the bonus stuff and you never even play the games, I want you to kind of feel like you still got value out of it. Because to me, the games are kind of the bonus features. Yeah, so this is kind of our approach, right? I don't think of these as games. I think of them as art books that you read with a controller. And because they're on a controller, on like a system that has a CPU and good video output and stuff, of course the games are in there too. Of course you could play them. But I think it's a new kind of product, and I don't think the industry has like language for it yet. I think we're sort of making this up as we go. But I mean, like, I think that if we're limiting video game systems to just playing traditional video games, we're missing out on a lot of potential. I mean, like, we can render things in real time. You know, we can go way further than DVDs and Blu-rays can go with bonus features. We can do all kinds of stuff. We can let you move the camera around in 3D to like see how, you know, levels were composed and things like that, and let you control that. You know, I've only seen one really good example of this, and it was brilliant. Did any of you guys ever have this thing? So this, yeah, it's a small handful. So this came out after Metal Gear Solid 2. It's the document of Metal Gear Solid 2. This is not a game. This is, and what do they call it? It's in here. It's an interactive documentary for Metal Gear fans is the final bullet point. And it's kind of exactly what I just talked about. It's like you can view all the models in the game. You can view a lot of the cutscenes and move the camera around. And so you can see how, like, to save video RAM, they make characters like disappear when they're off camera, and like you kind of get like insight, just, you know, even if like without reading a word, you know, you get insight into how game development works, because they're like, you start questioning, like, why did Vamp disappear in the background? Oh, it's because they needed to save memory. There's like behind the scenes documentation, like I think the design document's just in here and you can read it. Like, that's rare enough just anywhere, but like on a PlayStation disc, reading a design document, I think that's great. There's only been one product like this that I know of. I think there should be way more of those. And let's see. All right, so our latest digital art book, and the title of this talk, finally, is SNK 40th Anniversary Collection. This is a collection specifically of the earliest games from SNK. Well, more specifically, everything before 1990. So when 1990 hits, the Neo Geo hardware that they developed comes out, and they just pivot completely to that. So this is everything sort of before that moment. And like I said, each approach we do is different. Legacy Collection, I thought, was sort of a celebration for fans. Disney Afternoon was a nostalgia grab. Street Fighter 30th was meant to be like the definitive history, here it is. SNK 40th, I think of as an origin story, because SNK has a lot of fans, but they only really know the SNK from 1990 forward. And you know, in researching this product, I discovered to my horror that there's almost no good information out there about what SNK was in the 70s and 80s, and you know, who the developers were, and like there's not even, until this product, there wasn't even an English language list of all of SNK's games, which is like, what? Like, what are you fans doing? So we wanted to sort of show them where SNK came from, because I think you see the roots of a lot of what SNK became in these old games. And plus, we wanted to sort of course correct what I think of as the SNK history narrative. Because I actually think that the reason a lot of people don't talk about these old games is that there's no way to play a lot of these correctly. This is what was called the loop lever joystick. This was included on several SNK arcade games, including Akari Warriors. So like a normal joystick, it's 8-way. You tilt it to move your character around, but as you see in the second hand, you twist it. You twist the joystick to like aim the gun, which allows you to strafe and do things like that. And that's how these games were meant to be played. I'm gonna switch to the Switch now. So this might take me a second, hang on.
Around 10 seconds.
Oh, it's gonna do this again? Good. Okay. What if I do this? There it is. Okay. All right. Kind of jumping ahead of myself here, but okay. So let's go to Akari Warriors really quick. Oh, this is going to be very challenging to play from this angle. This is great. Oh. Yeah, so yeah, you're blowing my talk here. Come on. So okay, let me get rid of these guys. Okay, so again, it was a loop lever game originally, right? So you could twist your character around. Traditionally, when you would play this game, like for example, SNK re-released this game on the PSP and the PS3, a couple times on the PSP actually. And also, like typically when you play it in MAME, the best you can do is map rotate clockwise and rotate counterclockwise to shoulder buttons, and it doesn't feel good because if you were good at the original arcade game, you could sort of like muscle memory your way, right? So like you could be, pointing straight north and shooting guys, and if someone's coming at you from like all the way south, like if you were good at the game, you could twist exactly where you need to twist really quickly and shoot that guy, then twist back. And that's impossible if you have those shoulder buttons, because you're always like a slave to the timing of like how fast you can turn, and you just can't muscle memory it. So what we did was actually convert these games into twin stick shooters. So you can just kind of point wherever you want and shoot. Now, it kind of raises an interesting philosophical debate, because in the original arcade game, you couldn't do this. You couldn't like snap to extremes like that. So like technically we kind of made the game easier. I would actually say better. I'd say we made it like the twin stick shooter was always meant to be, but like in a way, we're kind of like rewriting history by saying this is the definitive version of Ikari Warriors, that you could shoot things with the twin stick and it's easy. But I don't think there's another option, right? Like I think there's just like mapping rotation to the shoulders, and I think there's this. And what we always try to fall back on at Digital Eclipse is what do we think artistic intent was by the original authors of this work? And in this case, I believe that the artistic intent was that you could muscle memory those movements, that you could quickly do that. And I think that this, I don't think it makes it easier to the point where you could do things you could never do in the arcade. I think it just kind of gets rid of some of the barrier of entry of like mastering the loop lever, which, by the way, actually feels kind of terrible if you've ever played a real one. I don't like it. So let's see. Okay, so another thing we added here in this game. So we talked about the challenge mode, right? So Mega Man Legacy, it was like snippets of the Mega Man game sort of mixed taped together. DuckTales, it was like authored boss rushes and time attacks and stuff like that. And what we kind of evolved that into a sort of a new feature was what we call watch mode. So for all the main games in here, you can just, I'll fast forward a little bit, you can just watch a playthrough. And this is me playing this, but it's a tool-assisted run. I'm not this good. And the idea here, again, was that like I don't think people should have to master these games to like enjoy them and see all their content. And I think that especially right now, a lot of the ways that people interact with old games is to watch people play them, right? Like, and I don't think that's something we should deny or try to fight against. I think that's great. And so, we threw this in so you could just watch them. I heard someone in the audience describe them as like included Let's Plays earlier, which I like. But what is kind of unique, though, is that you can jump in and start playing whenever you want, like in the middle of a video. Thank you. And that's like, if you guys are like emulation savvy, basically what we're doing with these tool-assisted runs, like typically like you guys know TaskBot and stuff like that. So TaskBot, all TaskBot knows is button inputs and how fast to do them, right? So what we do is sort of, we have that, right? Like we have the button input mapping, but we also are sort of connecting each button input to a save state. And so what you're seeing is basically a playback of button presses and save states, and that's why you could scrub back and forth through it, which I don't think anyone's done that before. I think it's cool. I saw a question, yes?
Now, do you kind of like include watch mode
Do I plan to include watch mode in all future releases? Stay tuned. I don't know. Because this was a lot of work to learn 21 games and record them. Like, it sounds ideal, but also I have to produce a game and ship it. But probably, yeah. I don't know if it makes sense. Just for example, if we were doing like Street Fighter again, right? I don't think it makes sense to like watch someone play through Street Fighter 2 as each character. What I do think makes sense is like what we should have done, which was an ending viewer, stuff like that. Like that makes sense, right? That's a good watch mode, but I don't think it makes sense to like watch all of Street Fighter 2. And also, it's like, what are we just gonna pick? Like, is it Ryu? You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of stuff to think about that it doesn't always make sense. But for games like this, it absolutely makes sense, and that's why we did it. I want to talk about the game selection a little bit because this is important to me. So there's, I think, 21 main games on here, and then like if there's a console version, the console version's on there also. Console means NES, but we can't say Nintendo or NES in a non-Nintendo product. And that's more games. That's over triple the games that we've ever done on any of these, and it's kind of almost even approaching like cowboy movie value pack territory. But I think we did an okay job. But I think more importantly, this selection was curated by us. Now, if you guys bought the game when it came out, it came with I think 11 or 12 games, something like that, and then we added 11 more as free DLC like a month after the fact. I've seen a lot of complaints online where it's like, why didn't they just include it in there? We weren't done. we gotta work. But so when we ship the game, the games that are on the cartridge are very much like the games people might actually buy this for. You know what I mean? So like Crystalis and Ikari Warriors, right? And a little bit Guerrilla War. Some people add that on the Nintendo. Like, we were very Western audience focused for what games people might actually like spend money on. Well, when it came to the DLC, it was like, who cares? We could put whatever we want in here. And that's when it got really fun. That's when we could, for the first time since 1981, publish fantasy. I'm just gonna let fantasy play. And I know the people who said yeah, I know why.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
What? Is that One Piece? So Fantasy is a 0-button game. It's just a joystick, and you are rescuing. You are Tom. You are rescuing your girlfriend Sherry. Look at these clouds, by the way, before they go away. You are rescuing your girlfriend Sherry, who keeps getting kidnapped in weird ways. So first, pirates grab her. So you got to go in and you just walk into the pirates to kill them, or you can trick them into getting shot. And every time you rescue her, she gets kidnapped again. So, oh no, a pterodactyl. So you have to get to the pterodactyl nest by kind of going through these guys for a while. Then you got to climb a ladder and there's a pterodactyl nest and there's a baboon throwing apples at you the whole time.
Help me!
Oh wait, let's get her kidnapping. Here we go. All right, you saved her from the pterodactyl. Some probably racist caricature just kidnapped her now, so now you got to avoid. Oh, do you guys recognize the music? That is straight up Funky Town. Our publishing partners didn't say anything, neither did I. It's Funky Town. Yeah, yeah, it's a good question. So you then rescue her from the, I don't know what to call them that's not offensive, so. Yeah.
Help me!
You rescue Sherry, and then she gets kidnapped by a tiny helicopter. And then you trick the helicopter's own cannon into shooting them all.
Help me!
I think this is a song too, whatever this is. All right, and then there's an ending. Hang on. Shh.
I love you.
I love you too.
So like, we were able to include fantasy. We were able to include Munchmobile. You guys know Munchmobile? No. All right. You are a car with arms and eyes, and you eat garbage off the road, and then you throw it away for bonus points because you're an environmentally conscious car. Now, I don't know if the arms are like the car or the passenger in the car. It's not clear. And then you drive home and everyone's happy. So like these are games that no one would like buy. You know what I mean? Like I don't think you put these out for $8. I don't think they're good games. Like honestly, I don't think they're good games, but I think that's okay. Like, yeah. So okay. You pronounce it Ozma. That's interesting. I always said Ozma, but who knows? So Ozma Wars, this is another one that we kind of restored. Like if you play it on MAME or whatever, or actually the stuff that SNK sold you in the past before they met us, it sounds awful, and it's because no one had gone to the original arcade board, which is actually kind of rare, and like recorded it. So we were able to actually restore the audio in this game, which is like it's pretty cool. It's pretty loud too. Like if you play this on MAME, it's just very like kind of grating, slightly more grating. But like, the hell is that? So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. That was a good opportunity to sort of like restore a game, and like I said, course correct SNK history, because just like Akari Warriors, that I think people don't understand how cool it is because they can't play it right. Like I don't think anyone understood how cool Ozma Wars was because it sounds like garbage if you try to play it anytime before this. And so we included, I don't know, I lost count, 20 plus games. Oh wait, what did I do? Stop that. No, that is the wrong button. We're in America now. All right, so we couldn't include every game because I would still be working on this. But what was really important to me, like I said, there was not even like a list of all of SNK's games. So again, going back to this notion of an interactive art book, like we straight up made an SNK history art book and just put it on this cartridge, and we go through literally every game that they made, including like these old Micon kit games that are lost. Like copies of this game don't seem to exist in the world anymore, the first SNK game. So like that's a photocopy from a library. I had someone go research for me in Tokyo so that we sort of know what these games are. And like I wanted these to be sort of vaguely interactive, like featurettes where, sort of RPG style, like the text scrolls and stuff, and you could zoom in and out on the images if you want. Well, you wouldn't really want to zoom in on this one, I guess, so much, but we were able, like, this is every game. Like, Yosaku's another lost one, which is really unfortunate, because it looks pretty rad. It's about a guy chopping trees down and getting pooped on by birds. And that one's super interesting, actually. So there was a hit song in Japan that year called Yosaku, about a guy who chopped down trees. And at least 3 companies made a Yosaku game called Yosaku. Like, the song was that popular. And like it was like its own genre for a while. It was like songs not officially based on this. I'm sorry, games not officially based on the song Yosaku. But for every one of these, if any piece of ephemeral material existed and I could substantiate it, it's in here. Because like this might sound pompous, but I actually think if we didn't do this work right now and document SNK's history right now, while most of them are still alive, while this material is still out there and can be found, like, I don't think this would have ever happened. Like, I actually don't think this would have ever happened. I don't think an SNK 50th anniversary collection could have gotten all this material, because we were able to, like, work with former staff who held on to this stuff. We were able to work with, like, collectors who still have this stuff. SNK was an amazing partner on this project because this is so rare for a Japanese company. They acknowledge that people worked for them before right now. And so like, not only did they let us talk to former staff and like credit them and everything, they actually paid them. Like they paid some of the old developers to like work with us and sort of fact check with us and put this history together, which is really cool. And not only that, so like, oh, actually, we were able to get Crystallis concept art from the artist, who was just so thrilled that like anyone cared. You know? And from and like one of the games didn't come out, so I found one person who had played it and kind of talked to him about it, like what was it like? And so like this is finally documentation of how Tangram Q played. It played terribly, I'm sure. It seemed like a bad game. But we were able to work with Yoshino-san, who was sort of their in-house like nerd in the 80s. Like they hired him because he was a fan, and he put out these like official zines, and these aren't scanned online. I mean, they might be now that you can rip them out of the game, but you know, he still had his zines, so we were able to include them. Yeah, like I don't know, like to me it was such a rare opportunity, this project, because not only again could we work with former staff and do the stuff right, we could include games that aren't necessarily, you know, the kinds of games that people would want to buy. And I don't think you can do that unless you do our approach to this. I guess you could if you're cowboy movie packing it. You could throw in whatever you want. Boy, I really love when this happens every time. There we go. So I don't know, like again, fantasy I don't think of as a good game. I don't think of Munchmobile as a good game. But I like it. I love it. Like I love fantasy, like obviously. And you know, the video game industry is still such a hits-driven industry that I don't know if there's room for this kind of material, but I want there to be. And I don't think that's crazy. Like, you know, these books were huge, right? And it's like they're compendiums of crappy superheroes. You know what I mean? Like it's an art book of crappy superheroes. Like I think in theory there is an audience that exists, and I think a lot of us are this audience that wants to play weird old games that aren't necessarily great, right? You know, the Warner Archive is a really good example of like finding a niche market for this material. Apparently the bestseller, because notice it is sorted by bestseller. The bestseller of the Warner Archive right now is Perfect Strangers Season 3. Yes, I've heard the theme song to Perfect Strangers, come on. Okay, but also like, and it's not just these packages, right? I think there might, I can see a future where someone, maybe it's us, maybe it's not us, can curate interesting games that aren't necessarily big hits, and it makes financial sense. The financial part of it is a really big problem because even our games, like it's so expensive to make games. It's so stupidly expensive, and a lot of it just has to do with the approval processes with the platform holders and things like that, like lot check with Nintendo and going back and forth on that. But I'd love to see a future where there really is a Criterion collection that's like curating cool, interesting content that is maybe not a guaranteed hit, so we do more fantasies and less, well, let's also do the Mega Mans, but you know, let's do them both. And that's it. Thank you so much. Please feel free to ask me questions now. All right, yes, you.
First question that occurred to me is, are you making plans or eventualities for 40 years from now if people want to come and look at this?
Oh, are we making plans for if people want to dig up our work 40 years from now? So I run a nonprofit, the Video Game History Foundation, and we might have all this source code just on a hard drive that we're not supposed to have. Next question. Yes. Yes.
So was there any, I'm trying to figure out, were you able to find anything about who the potential English voice actress for the theme song of Cycle Soldier was?
No, we were not able to substantiate who the vocalist for the English language of Psycho Soldier was, but legal was able to clear that we had the rights to use her voice, so we did, but we don't know who it was. That's another thing SNK did that I thought was great, was last time they released Psycho Soldier, it was on like a PSP collection or something. They did not include the vocals, but they actually, I forget the woman's name, but she was a vocalist at the time. Do you know her name? Is that why you're raising your hand? Okay. And so they were actually able to go back to her and like pay her to use her voice. Next question was here.
Yeah, for certain games that had both region differences, like switching between.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing. Thank you for bringing that up. We did include both regional variations if they existed. So like you could play the Japanese or the American one.
Well, on that topic, how difficult was it to procure just both versions of the game, or is that usually sort of an all-in-one package that SNK let you guys use?
Yeah. In this case, I don't think we really had to go out of our way for anything except Osmo Wars, because like no one had archived the color version of Osmo Wars before. Like we dumped those ROMs. Yeah, there was nothing. There's nothing particularly difficult to obtain, like game version wise. I believe you were next.
Yeah. So when you're talking about the Atari Warriors special listing, have you thought about releasing like a small third-party USB controller?
Have we ever thought about releasing a USB loop lever? I think it's a terrible idea because I would like our business to stay in business and not lose money. But yeah, we talked about it. I mean, sure. I think way in the back was the next one. You, yes.
First of all, thank you for everything that you do. Keep making these collections. I'll keep buying them.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I have a friend who has two small kids. One's 8, one's 5, and they are addicted to the Nintendo Online Switch service.
Okay.
As kids. They love pro wrestling. They love Group State Ransom.
They love pro wrestling.
They do. Their characters are Starman, and apparently John Cena is in the game. That's what they call him.
Okay.
They even showed
Strong Bad's in the game.
Group State Ransom, which my friend showed them Scott Pilgrim game after that.
Yeah.
Games are being lost. I know that you have experience having worked at GameCap before.
Yeah.
Do you think that these like streaming services have like these advantages to help keep Go games live? 'Cause it kind of reminds me of cable. I used to watch
Yeah.
Nick at Night. Or are they more again along the lines of what you're saying, Cowboy Collection? Maybe just now.
I think GameTap was very expensive. and I think that if it were financially feasible to finance the republishing of a bulk of old content, I think we would have seen that by now, and we haven't. So, you know, with Nintendo, you know, it's mostly first-party stuff. I think that there's some third-party stuff with partners that they still work with, right, who still exist as entities. And they're Nintendo. They're good at this sort of thing. But, you know, if you look around, like, it's really easy to see which games can be licensed and could theoretically be on a streaming service, because you just look at those crappy, like, boxes you could buy at Walgreens that have games built into them, and it's like, oh, boy, Joe and Mac, you know, like, burger time again. And, I talked about this at GDC, like, 3 years ago. I think that the legal hurdles like cost money, right? The legal hurdles to figure out where the rights to these games are, that costs money. And also publishing these games still costs a lot of money. And I think we haven't quite like eliminated one of those costs yet. So our goal of Digital Eclipse is hopefully get to the point where, you know, cranking out these collections gets cheaper. It hasn't yet. It's still really hard. But like that's kind of the goal of ours, is to keep building up our sort of like emulator cores that are commercially ready, so that we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. So, you know, maybe a couple years from now, like these can get inexpensive, and then we can start having those conversations about licensing things that might be tied up. Yes, Heidi.
Yes, so was there any trepidation from your publishing partner for SNK about releasing the older version of Guevara in the West?
Okay, was there any scare from our publishing partners about releasing Unaltered Guevara? No. However, there was trepidation from me when I found surprise swastikas in Great Tank. which QA didn't seem to find. And I found it like a week before ship. So scrub those right out. There wasn't any trepidation. There was trepidation internally from SNK, not from our producers, but from other people about putting the console games on here. Because they're like, why would you put the bad versions on here? Just put the good games. But our feeling collectively was that we wanted to give you sort of the full scope of SNK history, and those console games were, they were a big part of it. Like the home version of Guerrilla War, the arcade guys, not the people who worked on the actual game, but like actual arcade developers inside of SNK made that home port and added a bunch of new stuff. Like we didn't want to just eliminate that because it's like the inferior version. It's got a minecart level. I mean, come on. Yes, you in the back, yes. Yeah.
All right. I was looking at how you mentioned that Hikari recoded to have more of a twin stick shooter feel. It plays like a twin stick shooter now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That reminded me about how M2 developer tends to add new features or slightly a bunch of improvements onto an old game, and then that's the one version you might have.
Yeah.
It's kind of definitive. I'm thinking like Galaxy Force 2 on 3DS has a lot of graphics enhancements for different PS2, and were already custom built for that version.
Yeah. I wouldn't call it controversy. It's just kind of, when I say it was a philosophical debate, it was entirely in my head. But go on, sorry.
Do you think do you really look at what M2 does or create kind of standard error?
M2 is amazing. I think that M2 has particular talents that we lack, and also vice versa. Like, I don't think M2 could do the sort of like historical art book stuff that we do. I don't think they have like journalists on staff. That's my background. I'm a journalist. I'm an historian. But on the flip side, I don't know that we would have done the auto mapping on Phantasy Star, and I'm so glad that someone did, because now that game's playable. I love that game. I did a fan translation. I worked on a fan translation of Phantasy Star in 2005. Look it up. It's great. Oh yeah, and you can switch the FM sound chip and stuff. Yeah, it's stuff that we, it's. I don't know what budget they get. I don't know if they make more money than we do. We could theoretically do that stuff, but our budgets have traditionally been kind of skimpy on these projects, and literally every one of these projects has at least one or two bonus features that were not in our contract that we just made happen. Like SNK in the DLC pack, there's an 11th game that we did for free because we wanted to. We were only supposed to do 10, but I wanted every loop lever game in this package. I wanted that to be done because I know how hard it was to make them twin stick, and I wanted to make sure that all of them could be played correctly because, again, we're trying to course correct history. Yes, Zelda Hat.
You mentioned that most of them, they include the NES and arcade version.
If NES exists, yeah.
Yeah, but I guess one of my friends, he was talking about things that were different on the NES version of Athena.
Yeah.
Was that one added in DLC and I missed it, or
No, it was Athena NES is on there. It's on the cart that shipped. Yeah, it's there. Yeah, Japanese and American version. We are out of time. Thank you all for coming. So our partners NIS America at PAX West, it was a dumb idea I had, and then they did it, which is great. They reprinted some Psycho Soldier stickers that came out in the 80s, and I stole a small stack. So if anyone really wants some Psycho Soldier stickers, come on up, I'll give them to you. Thanks.